Okay, and we're back again, and today my guest is Dave Richardson. How you going, Dave?
Pretty good, man. That was a good party fade, I have to say.
You liked it?
You've obviously developed that skill over lots of parties where people play shit music.
Yeah, there's possibly an element of that involved. So, where would you like to kick off? How do you, so I know at the moment you're doing a play, and
I am, yes. It's your show, man. We can kick off wherever you want to kick off. Like, we can get into geopolitics, we can get into art, we can get into an argument, whatever you want to do, bro.
All right. Well, let's start with the play, because that's the most current thing that you're doing at the moment. So what's it called and where is it? And can you tell us about it?
Yeah, it's called The Other Place. It's written by Shah White, Sharr. You could probably tell. I'm sure he's a lovely guy, but it's American dudes. Yeah, I say that because I'm like, I don't know if it's one of those strange American made-up names. It's not really a name, to make the kid unique. But it's really well-written play, and it's on at Frio Theatre, which is brand spanking new. The building is 142 years old, I think. Don't quote me on that.
Yeah.
I can't remember what the rest of the question was.
Yeah, so I was just
tell you about it.
Yeah. Just tell us about the play.
So, what are we talking plot, or are we talking concept?
Let's go with what's the problem? What's needing to be solved, and is it resolved well, or is it, does it leave the audience wondering or wanting more? Or?
I can hear your cultural studies brain trying to fire up. Like, I remember this stuff.
Oh, not at all. I think maybe those days are over. I'm not sure.
I don't know, man. If you're teaching, it must be, and like we have to get into that at some point.
Definitely.
But in terms of the problem, it's without trying. I mean, anyone who sees this probably won't be able to buy tickets for the show. So without ruining any future productions, I'd say it's about a woman who is in denial about what is happening to her cerebrally.
Yeah, okay. That's pretty interesting.
And it's interesting because she's very intelligent.
Okay.
So, it's one of those, it's an interesting dichotomy of someone who is really intelligent but being stupid with what's happening to her.
Yeah, I think often you think about...
it sounds really...
It sounds really what? Sorry, you just... Of course, now you're dropping out.
It sounds really vague. It's about a woman who's a neuroscientist who is struggling to come to terms with the shit we all have to deal with, which is getting old and our systems starting to fail us, whether it's our recall of cultural studies degrees or my vocabulary after too much ice water.
Yeah. So is your main character an older lady playing that part?
Yeah, she's 52, 53, thereabouts. That's what's interesting is Kate Walsh is in the lead role for this production, and she's exactly the same age as the protagonist. So I know you're familiar with your theatre history. There was an element of when we were talking about how to do the score.
Yeah.
I remember talking to Steve McCall, who's the other side of my brain. I don't know whether it's left or right.
Yeah.
We were talking about the idea of potentially getting Kate to, do we get her to go, here's a playlist of stuff that I listen to? And we were talking about it, and it's is this just character development.
Yeah. Okay.
And then it got interesting because we were like, oh, she's exactly the same age. Is it a case of we're consciously engaging with her to try and have some kind of, and I'm probably going to say the name of the film wrong, like, is it Synecdoche? The Charlie Kaufman film? Kaufman?
Yeah, Kaufman. I'm not sure.
Do you know the film I'm talking about, though, where it's like the whole, they build a whole city in a massive warehouse and it just gets to this ridiculous level of what's real and what's an imitation of real?
Ah, right. I haven't seen that film. I am a big Kaufman fan, and I'll have to go and I'll get the details from you from that later because I want to watch that. Yeah. So are you going like, are you kind of, I guess it's a dance that you do, especially when you're making a production, any kind of production and you have someone that is the same age, you kind of go, now, do we go with what she does or do we consciously not go with what she does so that we're not making it her, like you. Yeah. It's a tricky one. It's a tricky one to do.
But it's funny because like, it's never been, you see a lot of those behind the scenes docos where you watch, I don't know, I'm much less well versed in theatre practice, right? But you watch any making of film and, and you see sometimes you get a director who might be tormenting an actor or an actor who's tormenting, you get a Daniel Day-Lewis, even though I'm sure he'd resent me saying, but like people putting themselves in those conditions to kind of blur the line between what's them and what's them playing a character. But it was interesting because I don't think we'd ever done it where it was like, I remember having a moment where I was like, oh, are we actually talking about purposefully finding out what her real, like Kate Walsh's real identity is in order to purposefully make her on stage like confuse the difference between her and the character as much as possible. Yeah. And letting her in on it, but like playing with that whole thing of like, instead of it being like, let's help you create, the character's backstory and like what music do you think they would have listened to? That element of like, what if we just try to mess with your head so that you think you're this person intentionally? Not in a demented schizophrenic way, but like, normally it seems like a much more academic approach. Like, I know you're familiar with that stuff. Whether it's people talking about sense memory or I always forget the dude's name. I much prefer his approach.
Michael E.
Meisner.
Oh, Meisner.
Yeah, where it's about physicality. I always just thought, if you're going to get someone to play carpenter, like, get
a carpenter
to do carpentry, then he will tell the truth. The same as like smoking. I don't smoke, but every smoker I know is like, you can tell on film.
Sometimes
building the physical reality. But we were just talking about how it might be interesting to consciously manipulate her real life experience with her consent in order to make it more immersive for her. Like, we didn't end up doing it because we were just like, is this just gimmicky? I think it was an interesting idea.
Yeah, I think that's kind of part of the acting process anyway. I think, an actor will always try and find something from their own story that they relate to with the character. Or, so it's kind of, 50-50, I reckon, on that one. I think, you could probably get away with it.
I think the only advantage we have is as musicians, like everyone's, like advertising uses music to shortcut emotions all the time.
Yeah.
Whether it's using Fleetwood Mac to advertise a car or whatever. They're just trying to cut into popular psychology. You get it all the time with 60s films. Like, I love Oliver Stone. But I feel like so many people have done that similar technique where it's like, okay, so it's 60s
You're going to get
Activism, we're going to hear Creedence, we're going to hear The Doors, we're going to hear insert, whatever band, Pink Floyd, whatever it is.
Yeah.
It was just, it was cool to kind of talk about it like, oh, wow, what if we deliberately tried to participate in something borderline unhealthy, where it was just like, let's actually maybe say, do you want to, have a bunch of music that's like, I'm this person, like where we just try to hijack your senses before the show and during the show.
Yeah, yeah. I wonder how she's coping with it. with all that.
Well,
I mean, she's.
Say we didn't go that way.
Yeah, I'm sure, but I'm sure, like, I know myself with acting, those kind of things are really interesting to explore as an actor as well. So when you're presented with this idea, and it's sometimes it's a new idea to you, and you're like, well, let's try it. Let's see let's see what it does to me, and let's see, maybe that will bring something out that, we can capture something on stage, because, and it's such a beautiful medium, the live performance, it's really great. Now you're in Western Australia, so you're pretty lucky, like no COVID cases at the moment, right?
Not for a while, I don't think.
Yeah, as far as I know, I think it's been quite a while now in Western Australia, no cases. And also, so things must be pretty much back to normal. But what about the seating in the theatre? Are they going to social distance seating? Is it like half capacity?
No, not. It's a traverse stage, so the staging is really different anyway. Again, this is probably me being like, I'm not super familiar with lots of aspects of theatre. Like, I feel much more comfortable talking about form when it's to do with film, but it's not proscenium. It's not. Proscenium, I think, is the one where it's like they're on a stage and that's it. But then there's also the one where they follow you through, which I might be mixing up with proscenium. Anyway, so the audience faces each other, right? Which is interesting because, that was a deliberate choice by Renato Fabretti.
Oh, Renato's, wow.
Yeah, Renato's, man, he's the one starting this whole theatre company.
Yeah, okay.
So,
the voice of Ford, right?
Sorry?
The voice of Ford.
Oh, man, I don't know. I haven't watched Peasant TV for so long, which sounds snobby as
but I'm sure that... Peasant TV is kind of gone as a thing.
I think it's between Renato and Amanda Woodens. I'm pretty sure they've got all the voiceover work stitched up.
Yeah.
WA.
Yeah, I remember hearing him on the Ford ads all the time. Like, I'm going, oh, that's Renato. Oh, that's Renato.
Oh,
yeah,
man.
All the time.
Which is hilarious. The guy's as subversive as, me or you.
Yeah. So we got onto Renato there somehow. So you've got the audience facing each other, and that's a really interesting concept, because that will unsettle the audience anyway, because they'll be conscious of being observed.
Well, here's the funny thing. Like, I think they actually wanted to do that, and this isn't... Laurie Cullen Tate has designed the set itself, so I don't know how much of this is Gary Ferguson, the production manager's idea, or Renato Fabretti, who's the the head of the Frio Theatre Company, the director.
Wow.
Or if it's Laurie Cullen Tate, where instead of it being, which it normally is, like very Brechtian and like self-reflective, and the audience is aware that they're an audience, it seems much more keyed towards one of the underlying fundamentals of the play, which was this idea of we haven't been able to be in a communal space for a really long time, which goes to your question about social distancing.
Yeah.
Like, people have been having really raw reactions to this, and it feels to me like they're really grateful to be in a space together. Having said that, this is from a guy who does sound, because I'm great talking about concepts, but like put me in a room with people where it's like be social, and like I just turn into this Irish guy who is like, oh, you told me to be social, so I have to do the opposite.
Yeah.
But I think that is a really big deal for the audience, because they are coming out of it pretty dazed and confused when, like, I find it intolerable to sit in a performance, right? Because you do all this work and you're like, I just sit there going, I hope this next view's good. I hope this next view's good. I hope this, like, and so I just sit there with that anxiety that the performers must have.
Yeah.
But it's tolerable to sit in the bar and like watch people come out.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of 1,000-yard stairs.
Yeah, right. Well, that's good.
Yeah, I think, like, you know, I don't know, you're familiar with Full Metal Jacket, so like seeing people come out and just be like, I don't know whether to shit or go blind. Like, feels like a bit of a win.
Yeah, I think it's a win. You know, I mean, the last thing that you want is people to come out and just be completely ambivalent and be, you know, well, you know, I mean, I think that's every director and every actor's nightmare, is somebody like, oh yeah, I saw you in that. Yeah, did you like it? Oh well, you know. Like, fuck,
I mean, the irony
really?
is they might come out like that. They never say that to your face, which is, you know, something actually relates to when you were like, hey, do you want to do the podcast? I was just like, man, I'd love to, but I don't want to self-censor to the point where I become Dave Sans personality.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh,
because people are aware of that. Like, you get that in Perth a lot, where it's like people are like, what do you think of the show? And really what they're saying is like, you know, what did you like about the show?
Yeah.
You know, and it's not like I want to shit on people's work, but there's that element of like, you feel like persona non grata when you give a critique, even if it's couched in, as a teacher, you'll get it. Like, you know, the feedback sandwich of like, here's what I liked, here's what I think could be worked on, you know, to the point where it can be detrimental. But spying on the audience from the bar when they come out is a, you know, it's a very candid photo.
Yeah.
You know, you get unadulterated reactions when they come out.
Yeah.
It's just it's got its own limitations.
Yeah, it's an interesting one too, especially like in Perth when people are asking you questions. And it's usually like, you know, if you're in Perth and you've got somewhere doing something in the industry, you're going to know people, and you know that they know people. And you know that what you say, if they don't like it, it can, you know, if they're a little precious or something, and, you know, you're just being honest, and, you know, you just want to be honest because you're like, you asked me, like, don't fucking ask me if you don't want to know.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you can become, you don't want to be a pariah. And it feels like, you know, we're all, every time I try not to think about it, I end up thinking about that scene from Braveheart where it's like, you know, you're too busy fighting for the scraps from Longshanks' table. It's like, that is the arts in Australia, where like, you want to support each other. And this is something that COVID has really driven home to me. I remember talking to Steve, my like primary collaborator, and being like, I feel so isolated for the first time in terms of there's all this lip service paid to community.
Yeah.
But in the artist community is kind of forced by capitalism to compete with itself.
Yeah.
So like, even when you're happy for someone who's got a grant or whatever, that's like, you know, half an orange peel less on the table that you can get.
Yeah.
It's like you're kept in this subservient state. And I think you don't mean, even when you're like, you know, they might be worthy, I think it destroys the community a little bit when there's so little funding to go around, or like patronage, you know, for lack of a better term, that people might not be jealous. Like, I don't think I am jealous myself in the past, but you just like, if you're honest with yourself, it's hard sometimes to be as supportive or, when there's a box ticking exercise that gets a funding grant or whatever.
Yeah.
That the person that they've smuggled a good idea, or there's an idea in there that is their passion. And like the best sometimes it feels like you can hope for is that their subversive passion, can get past the box ticking bullshit that they have to jump through hoops wise to get money.
Yeah. 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 It's a strange setup, but getting back to your earlier point there on community, I think I think it has kind of somehow strengthened the community by the isolation, whereas I think people have kind of cut away that bullshit layer of that competition and because everyone's in it together. Yeah. And I think they're applying that same kind of idea in their mind that, hey, I'm actually in it together with all the other artists, and so when I get out of this, we're all in our art together, and that the sense of community dealing with a problem together can be translated into their more refined parts of their community that they hang out in. And so when they get to those communities, they're going to be more likely to be, oh, look, I really appreciate you. Like, I've had all this time away from you, and I really appreciate you more than, I wish you didn't get all that money for that grant because now the rest of us aren't going to have so much or whatever. But like, it seems to become less of an issue. I think, is that what you're getting at? Is that what you're sort of saying?
That's what I hope happens. Like, I don't know if it's the case, like purely. So I'll give you an example, right? So Fringe Festival is going ahead next year.
Yep.
And I know it's been an issue for a long time where during Fringe Festival, everybody except the artists who make Fringe Festival happen, everybody else makes a living. Like, the bars sell more liquor, the hotels have more accommodation booked, and then you get the people who are creating the spectacle working for a pittance.
Yeah, man.
I think that's a great community because all of them are getting a pittance.
Yeah.
So if there's less gatekeeper mentality with it's not the alphabet soup that is the former DCA and the current DLGSW, whatever the hell it is, alphabet soup. That's much more independent, but like it's not a livable wage.
Yeah.
And it's funny because, people are talking about how necessary the arts are. And I remember probably the funniest thing I saw was like, it was a pamphlet and it was like the results of a survey that were like, what are the jobs that we need during the pandemic? I don't think it was in Australia. I think it was in a different country, but it's still demonstrative. And it was like, doctors, nurses, whatever, not to undercut them, but it was all the usual suspects, right? Mm. And then there was another column that was like, what's the least necessary? And like artists were number one. But the hilarious thing was, it was like infographics. And I was like, well, you still had to hire a graphic designer to put it together. Like, so, it's like, T-shirt represent. It's like Fight Club, man. We cook your meals. We guard you while you sleep.
Yeah.
We drive your ambulances. Don't fuck with us. Artists make life bearable and they just get shat on all the time.
Yeah.
But the community thing, the question you asked, it feels like the real problem, and I think this goes into, I've had a lot of conversations about what's going on in the progressive left at the moment, right?
Yeah.
The thing is, people are focused on, I don't know, whatever reductive term I use, whether it's like pronouns or whatever.
Yeah.
Or ethnicity. I think all that's important, but I think people forget that, like, underneath it all, the problem is capitalism.
Oh yeah, look,
Doesn't matter how all that shit goes. Like, the thing that controls how you relate to each other, the economic, socio-cultural things,
yeah,
it's capitalism, right? So when you're talking about, even as a practicing artist, it's like the first question is, how do you market it? Then it's like, okay, how do you get people to come? What venues are you going to use? How do you tour it? How do you staff it?
yeah,
It's all about how do you monetize this thing. And I'm not saying artists should be given a handout, but underneath all of this stuff about how we want to phrase things is like, what's the root problem? And it's like how we distribute wealth and the economic ideology that we follow, right?
yeah,
Community is somewhat corrupted inherently, I think, when it's based in this system that doesn't give a shit about, the beautiful thing about art is, what do you need to live? Food, water, shelter.
yeah,
I'm probably missing something. Like, art doesn't make sense. Like, back in the day, there were cavemen painting on walls, and I'm sure their fellow cavemen were like, dude, what the fuck? We could have used that bone for something else. Why'd you make a flute out of that for? We could have used it for a spear.
yeah.
But, people start telling each other stories, it starts social bonding, whatever it is, like whatever, maybe there's a biological reason, but it gets forgotten, in times like these until someone points out obvious things like, who's binging on Netflix shows? Everyone's hand goes up.
Yeah.
You can thank, Greek playwrights all the way back, or you can thank Gilgamesh for that. Next time you're watching whatever show it is, let's thank narrative which is part of the art world for that thing. And the community, I think, comes out of not financial, but acknowledging the engagement and joy. And the follow the bliss aspect that Campbell talked about of, sharing cultural experiences or sharing a good story on any level, no matter what your medium is. Like you were in the army, right?
Yeah. Yep. That's right. Yep.
So I remember there was a teacher at uni, right, who we didn't really get along because she was from the Czech Republic, and and I'm pretty left wing, so she had not a positive experience growing up in the Czech Republic before it was, invaded by the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
But she taught us about this concept called solvitur ambulando, which I still grasp to this day. I think it's genius, right? So it's this whole idea of, philosophers used to use it a lot, where it's like, it's solved by walking. So if you've got an idea, go for a walk, and you'll like having a shower, you'll mull it over. But film has become, in some ways, you can do that. Like, I can watch Saving Private Ryan and be like, wow, military invasions suck. Look how horrible this is, without having to do it myself.
Yeah.
So I can, walk in, in a member of the armed forces' shoes and kind of get an idea of what maybe PTSD is or what combat is, without, obviously nowhere near the same level, but like maybe I can empathize a bit more with those people.
Oh, definitely.
And that rang a bell through all our differences as individuals, that I was like, holy shit, man, there's a real integrity to that concept.
Yeah.
And I think community can gather around that. It's like, we're just trying to share, not to convince each other that like this is the right thing to do, but just to be like, this is my story, take it or leave it. I'm just telling it. I think we're all richer for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And like on that's pretty much my, reason for the podcast, really, is that I think everyone's got a story, and people are interesting. And I think, I know a lot of interesting people. And so I contact them and say, come and be interesting. But not like you have to be interesting, but, come and be on the program, and, the world will get to see how interesting you are. Like, last week with Michelle, it's like a mermaid and a jazz harpist, and that's interesting, And
she's bored. Fuck that bitch. Nah, Michelle's awesome.
Yeah, she's awesome.
And like, man, one of the reasons I was so chuffed that you were doing this show was because I still remember when I was doing, it was a unit, Culture, Institutions and Power at Murdoch.
Yeah.
And I was like, I want to interview you. I want you to tell me all, you know, the nooks and crannies about what your experience was in the armed forces.
Yeah.
And I remember you were like, yeah, sure. And I remember being like, it went from, you know, a desire to do well because the institution of university was like,
Requires it, yeah.
A D is better than a D. You know, do well in your degree. It quickly went from that to like, oh wow, this is, you know, like I'm getting a part of the prism that, you know, is not normally reflected in common narrative. So I still feel like I kind of owe you for that.
No, not at all. Until you mentioned it, then I've completely forgotten about it. So.
It was obviously transformative for you too.
Well, you know, I think you know, some people, especially like when you're studying those kind of things, because there's so, you know, there's so much ideology in it, and there's so much indoctrination. You know, it's a very interesting thing to find out about, and because I had been studying it as well, so I was aware of the indoctrination and the ideology that goes with that, and so I had a decent insight into it as well. So I was probably the right person to talk to about it, because other soldiers would say, "Yeah, man, it's fucking great." Sorry to all the soldiers out there.
You know what's funny though is, like, again, I think it taps into that idea of people want to share their stories, like your whole podcast. Like, the other person I spoke to was another Michelle's father.
Yeah.
From Ireland.
I remember Irish Michelle.
Yeah. Yep. So, you know, I won't, you know, to respect his privacy, I won't mention his surname, but like, you know, it went from, I asked her, hey, can I speak to your pop? And she was like, you can ask him, but he's not going to tell you anything. He doesn't like to talk about it. To like, you know, we sat down in the lounge room and came out like 4 hours later, and her and her mum were like, what the fuck's going on here?
Yeah,
you
how did
know,
that
like,
happen? Yeah.
But there was no, it wasn't like getting blood from a stone. Like, he was, he wanted to just talk about what it was with no agenda, just like, you know, this happened, then this happened, then this happened. Like, you know, I want you to know what the story is. It's not trying to fit into a narrative. It's just like, I got into this country, and then, do you want citizenship? You can go for the draft. And then I didn't get along with this guy, and so I got put on this duty, and it sucked. But that's how hierarchy works, and I did this, and this is how I met my wife, and rah, rah, rah. It was like, enlightening.
I think also what happens is, you know, he's probably reluctant to tell all those stories to the family because he lives with them, you know. But to tell a stranger or someone else, there's kind of a freedom in that where you feel more liberated, and just that someone's interested to know, you know, and also, you know, that they don't know everything about you. So you can tell them the story, and you feel freer to tell them the story, where they're not going to look at you and go, man, that doesn't sound like you, or, you know, because
Well, it's funny because it didn't sound like him at all. Because he, you know, beautiful photo and all this, and I was like, oh man, here we go. Like, all right. But it was, there was no, it was just like very matter of fact. And the funny thing is, you talking about how they don't know you, right? Yeah. So in the play, in the other place, there's a beautiful scene that I remember when we were reading it, it was like, this is the crux of the whole thing. Yeah. Where there's an interaction with a stranger that is so, it works both ways. Like, the stranger is like, this person doesn't know me at all, and so they confess a whole bunch of stuff, you know, what's going on with them, because they feel, like you said, there's no...
that anonymity.
Yeah, there's no baggage there with, like, they're not supposed to be somebody, and then vice versa. The same thing happens where there's also, like, an awareness of I think they both use it as a confessional.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's funny because I remember years ago reading about like the origins of the Catholic Church, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And I remember reading like, confession used to be in public.
Wow.
I know.
That's serious.
Right?
That's you're serious then. Yeah, you're totally serious. If you're prepared to get up in front of everyone and say, well, I did this.
And you wonder, like, how much would that help with community bonding? Like, airing all that dirty laundry and just being like, look, man, I want to have sex with your wife. I thought about it.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting. I wonder if they put a sock in that because it's like, nah, there's too much going on, or I think it'd be interesting to chart the rise of like Western individualism with things like that, where it used to be communal and it gets shrunk down to like a personal experience.
Well, the other thing is you could just go live in a small village because everyone knows your business anyway.
Yeah. Well, that's Ireland, man. I don't know if I'd want to go back there.
Yeah.
Great writers, great poets, but it's very, everyone knows what time you came home last night kind of job.
Yeah, I have that too, but it's thanks to loud exhaust pipes. Most people know what I'm doing.
Are you riding a Harley or something where it sounds like 50,000 fat people slapping together?
I actually have just bought a new motorcycle over here. It's actually a 250cc, and so I had this conversation last night, actually. So Harley Davidson actually has, I'm pretty sure, copyrighted their sound, right? And they basically, Yamaha copied, they had a V-twin motor, the same as Harley Davidson, or very similar. But, my personal opinion is that, it's probably a bit better than the Harley, like more reliable, etc. God, I don't know if I'm going to get sued now. So Harley Davidson.
Surely no one sensible could deny the reliability of Japanese motors.
Well, there's that. Yeah, there's that. So what happened was the Yamaha sounded exactly the same as the Harley Davidson. So Harley Davidson sued Yamaha about the sound. And I remember this court case, and I was thinking, what a ludicrous kind of thing to be suing over the sound, right? But they did, and they won. They actually won that case. Now, I don't know how much political stuff was involved with, like it's a Japanese company and it's an American company. And in America, they won because it's an American motorcycle versus a, other.
Yeah.
But so that happened, right? So then motorcycle companies were not allowed to make motorcycles that sound exactly the same as the Harley Davidson. Now in China, they don't give a shit, right? So China could give a rat's ass about all that kind of copyright crap. And so the bike that I have sounds exactly the same as a Harley Davidson, and it rides like I had an old 1000cc Ironhead Sportster. And really, I've got to say that this bike rides almost identically to that bike. It's only a 250, so it's obviously not as powerful, but it rides almost the same.
It's such a weird thing. It's like, why draw attention? Especially, so Harleys are associated with bikie gangs, right?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Why would you want to draw attention to yourself?
If you're in a bikie gang, right, you want to be being covert.
Criminal enterprise. Yeah, you don't go do B&Es with like LED light suits on, like the guy from the guy who sings opera in The Running Man.
Yeah, I think.
You don't. Yeah, like ninjas wear black for a reason.
Yeah, well, also I think if you're a devious kind of person, you're not riding your Harley to go and do B&Es. I think the Harleys are about the kind of intimidation aspect of it as well, and it's loud, and you can't kind of deny that sound, that volume. But where was I going?
Oh yeah, I never thought of it like that. I'll give them credit for that, because when you say Harley, I cringe, because I'm like, the noise of those things is just, I hate it, because it's just like horrible, and there's no charm to it.
Yeah, well,
it's the sound of someone, in my mind, trying to like rationalize their own ego.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely something to
It's just
Harley's,
so loud, and you know, and there's a reason why post World War II, Harley Davidson had a massive market share of the United States motorcycle industry. By the 80s,
yeah,
the Japanese had undercut them and like they managed to throw it away because their product was inferior. You know, I mean, all you got to do is read Hell's Angels by Hunter Thompson. Is like he talks about that at length, where it's just like, man, it might be loud, it might sound a certain way, but it, you know, can't polish a turd.
Yeah. I think there's a lot to that, but one of the things with sound is that you know, people hear you coming, and when you're in a motorcycle, that's like a pretty dangerous place to be on the road. You're not protected by a car, you know, doors and windshields and all that sort of thing. So loud is good, you know. It's like
is the dropout that we had long feared.
No, we're still going. But the sound and having that volume means people hear you, and then they look and they see you, and they don't hit you. Hopefully, that's kind of the thing. You know, when I was riding in Australia, I always tried to have loud motorcycles for that reason. Was that, and also people talk about, you know, going up the middle and all that sort of thing. But if you're in the front, it's a much better place to be. You can kind of control what's going on from the front of the pack, and you don't have to worry about what's behind you. But
well, I take it all back. If that's why Harleys sound like that, that is actually a good idea.
Yeah, it is a good idea. I don't know if it's why they sound like that. I think they sound like that because that's their market, and it really now does revolve a lot around their sound. But it's good to have a loud motorcycle, like even like a Jap bike. You know, I had loud Jap bikes as well for that reason, because people, they hear it and they look, and if they look, they see you, and if they see you, they don't hit you. And that's, you know, that was always my rationale for having loud. And after a while, you kind of get used to it, and you think, that sounds awesome, and you know, you kind of love it as well. And you know, you probably make it louder, probably unnecessarily sometimes. But you know, if you're into motorcycles, that's the thing, and that's kind of what you do. But I was okay. So here's the story, right? With my motorcycle, I bought it online. So I bought a custom motorcycle online. I messaged them, and they translated from English.
So it was sight unheard, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it sat at the school for a while. Like, so it came in a crate, and I had to put it together, and I put it together, and but I didn't have a license for China, which I do have now. So I got like a Chinese driving license.
Hang on. Put it together. Are we talking like flat pack IKEA stuff here, or are we talking like you just got to screw the wheels on and stuff, or did you have to like assemble everything around the motor?
No, so it was just it was basically everything was together, but to pack it, they had to take parts off to fit it into the box. So like the handlebars were off. Like just a few things.
Whatever you lean on. To lean back, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, pretty much. So I put it together, and then I was like, well, I can't ride it because I don't have a license, and you know, when you ship, and this is pretty much universally worldwide, you can't send things with fuel. So then I found out that in China, it's illegal to siphon fuel out of another vehicle and put it into your vehicle. Like, even if you have the permission of the owner, like, you can't do it. And so I got my friend to take me to the gas station, and it's illegal to put, well, it's not illegal, but it's really, really difficult to put it into a can as well, right? And they wanted my passport and all that kind of shit because they were worried that I was going to go make Molotov cocktails or something. I don't know, but the way my Chinese friend explained it to me was, you know, a wife might be angry at her husband and go and burn down his apartment. So that was his description of it. Why he thought it might be like why you can't go and just buy a can of juice, you know, and go put a can of juice in your bike. So I actually had to subversively go into the car park of the school, and there was another motorcycle there, and I know the guy, and he's not in the country because of COVID, and take, you know, like siphon out put his bike next to my bike and get like a container and fill it up and then pour it into my tank. But then that was the first time I started it, and then I was like, holy fuck, how loud is this thing? I couldn't believe how loud it was, because it's 250cc and it doesn't have a right to be as loud as it is. and they've worked at getting it loud.
Then you've got a motorcycle that's drawing attention to the fact that you just illegally siphoned fuel into that same motorcycle.
No, it was all done very covertly, and no one was any the wiser. And China is also the land of cameras, man. There's cameras everywhere. So there's cameras in the car park and cameras. So I had to do a bit of a reconnaissance and go and find out where all the cameras were. And
is the only legit way to do it to push it to the fuel pump?
That, I think, was what they were suggesting I did. Yeah, was that I pushed the bike to the fuel station and fill it up. Anyway, I didn't, and I stole fuel, and I, got it going, and now I'm riding
there's
it.
a lot of bikes that are going to be really heavy to push to it,
but also these bikes haven't been transported, so they probably, when you buy them, they've probably got juice in them. So it's no problem. But because mine had been transported, that was why it was empty. So, I had to. It was just one of those things. It was like, another thing. We're like with this bike, and then you can't park it there, and then so another thing I wanted to do was park it under the apartment building where I live. There's a basement park down there, and but there's boom gates to get in and out, and they operate off number plates. So I don't have a number plate on the front, so I can't operate it. But then they were like, oh no, there's a Bluetooth setup that we put on your motorcycle, and we'll do that, right? And we'll get it all done.
It doesn't China.
Yeah, so I was like, this is going to be great. I'm going to have my motorcycle and be able to park it downstairs. I'll be able to work on it down in the basement and all that. And then there was a lot of messing around trying to find the actual person who was in charge to get it done. And so we went and we found this guy, and we've got all the ducks are in a row, and we know how much it's going to cost and everything. I'm ready to pay. And then he goes, and I have someone with me translating, but I could tell straight away. He was like, no. And then he's pointing to all the windows and he was basically saying, your bike's too loud, man. You're going to wake all these people up when you leave in the morning to go to work. And so after all this days of negotiating to get the parking space and all that, the final solution was, no, you must park your bike out on the street away from everybody. We don't want it. It's too loud. So yeah, that was the downside of having a loud motorcycle in China.
Is it just the mufflers? Could you just put a muffler on it and then problem solved?
Yeah. So that's a baffle, right? The thing that slides up inside the motorcycle muffler is called a baffle, and you can I guess I could probably find them somehow. I mean, you can pretty much find anything in China, so I guess I could probably find that and overcome.
I'm just curious. I remember, living next to some people with the same problem, and they would start their bike up and warm it up before they went to work, and it would be just and you just sit there going,
come on, man,
die. I hope this person dies.
Yeah. So I have another story too about loud mufflers. I was living in not Swan View, but out that way towards the hills there. And I worked at a foundry, and I had a Harley, and my Harley had no baffles. So it was straight out exhaust. It was loud. And I mean, I know people who have been around the Harley scene that said that's one of the loudest Harleys they've ever heard, because it was so, I ended up getting busted for it. I ended up having to buy law. Totally. Oh, look, I totally get it. And I'm just thinking back to how much of an asshole I was, because I had my Harley, and I started work at 5. So,
dude.
Yeah, so I was leaving, and I mean, this is how loud it was. When I rode down the street, it would set off car alarms. It would do just the vibrations. And so every day when I went to work, and here's me, and I'm thinking, I did have a little bit of self-respect at that time, and I was thinking, man, this is so loud, and I was trying to kind of ride it as quietly as I could, but the thing was friggin' outrageously loud, and it was setting off car alarms, and I was just thinking, man, what an asshole. People who live next door to me must have just been, you are the biggest dick I've ever met in my life, with that friggin' motorcycle, with your fucking Harley. We know what time you go to work. We know what time you come home. And man, 4:30 in the morning, starting that thing up. And I lived in a cul-de-sac, so they must have just been You dick. What an asshole. And
Making friends.
yeah, man. It's one of those things I think back on, like at the time.
This is why you had to move to China?
Yeah. Possibly. I just didn't learn how much of a dick I was, But yeah, man, what an asshole. I was such an asshole, really. When I think about that, yeah, that haunts me now. I sort of think, oh man, you didn't you're just so young and, not thinking about anyone else but yourself and getting through life and, dealing with my own problems.
You've learned your lesson. You know, self-reflection.
Well, have I, because now I'm being banned from parking in the car. Oh, hilarious.
And they must be pretty low standards too. I mean, I'm assuming in China, I don't know, it's like I lived in Bunbury for so long that coming back to Perth, I'm like, oh, this place is so loud. I can only imagine what
an
actually populated urban area is.
Well, I took my bike to go over the pits, to get inspected here. And I was surprised they didn't say, what is that exhaust on that motor? They were just like, yeah, that's a nice looking bike, man. And they were just saying, yeah, that's cool, and checking the engine number and checking the lights worked and looking at it and almost with contempt, why would you buy that piece of shit? Almost, that bike didn't cost you $500,000. Why did you bother? Why did you bother spending so little money? Because it's a big thing here, how much you pay for it. And when people ask me how much I pay for it, I'm kind of obliged to lie in the higher level, and say that it cost a lot more, because they think I'm an idiot if I say I spent.
You've fallen for the capitalist ruse, man. Don't do it.
Yeah, well, I tell them.
It's a good bike.
I tell them. Yeah, I tell them what I paid, and then they, I know, my friends tell me, they just go, "Oh, he didn't pay enough." He didn't pay enough for that bike. In Australia, you'd be going, "Man, you got a great deal." That's a great,
yeah.
But over there, it's it's weird, right? It's reverse of what Western culture would be.
Is it? Yeah, I wonder if it's if the government controls price points on certain products, it's hey, look, my status symbol is being able to be extorted by capitalist suppliers of motorcycle goods.
Yeah, I have
Whereas you're oh man, what? You're an idiot. You just get mocked for spending retail value,
I have a very, very simple explanation for it, and that is that they live in China, and that sometimes if you buy something from China, it isn't as good as it possibly could be, and they're in the home of buying things that break the first time you use them when you don't spend much money on them. So for them, spending money on something is wise because you're more likely to get a better quality product. And they know that.
Yeah.
They know that. Cheap is shit, and if you spend the money, you get good. And so I think that's the thing. I think they think, oh, because it's cheap, it's shit. It must be shit because cheap things are shit.
I think there's a point for that. I think with cars and bikes, it's different because they're very much status oriented, right?
Oh, definitely.
So Ferraris, Maseratis, and that, I don't get it. But for example, I like musical equipment, and Moog stuff is expensive.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's because the circuits are good and it's a co-op.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's people are you read reviews and they're yeah, you pay more money for it, but it's really loud. The signal flow is excellent, and it's not going to break.
Yeah, you get what you pay for. Yeah, and I think the Chinese think that as well. And I mean, of course they must, because they are the country that produces a lot of shit, a lot of cheap shit. They really do. I bought a pair of pliers, right? They were $4. And I bought them to unpack my motorcycle because a lot of it was tied down with wire, and I needed to cut the wire off my motorcycle. And I had two pieces of wire that I needed to cut, right? and I undid them, and I got as far as I could, and then I was like, now I have to cut it. I've just got to cut that last bit. So I got online, bought some pliers. Just I was like, $4, $5 are cheap. You know, I don't care. Brought them and cut one, and through cutting the second one, I snapped the metal handle on the pliers. And I was like, I've been going to the gym, man, but I don't think that's what's been going on with me going to the gym. You know? Snap the handles, man. Snap the handles. I've never snapped the handle on a plier before in my life, but I've had good pliers. Now, just on that, like while we're talking about tools and stuff, were you saying that you're a chippy now?
No, I was a chippy in the past life.
Oh, okay.
Never.
It's interesting.
Yeah,
because
seems like a long time ago.
Okay. Yeah, because I actually did an electrician's apprenticeship, which I was, I unfortunately, like I did a mature age, and I got to that age where no one's going to it.
As well?
No, it was in WA, but I just got to the age where, like, people say that they're not ageist, but employers are ageist, and I think once I hit like 48, it was like, no, we're apprentice. No, we're not going to have him. Yeah, like companies get a lot of money for taking adult apprentices, and they actually get tax benefits for doing it. And so there's like a kind of thing where they shuffle you around to companies because they want to get that tax benefit, but that's all they want, and you don't get training. Really, I didn't get very much training at all, and but fortunately, where I started on the mines as an apprentice electrician, and that was really good. And the two guys that I worked with there were unreal electricians, and they knew what was what, and they were like, I learned everything from them. And then I went into construction, and I was just basically, I don't think I wasn't even allowed to fit off wires, so it was just absolutely ridiculous. And then I got made redundant twice, and it just got increasingly more difficult to be able to find work. So I wasn't able to continue and finish it. Like, I finished all the school. I just didn't get to finish the apprenticeship, I'm pretty sad about that, because I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed being an electrician, and it was one of those things I could have seen myself doing. But didn't happen, and I jumped back into the Chalkie, get on the boards, and that's where I am now. So, and you wanted to ask me something about teaching?
Well, yeah, man, fellow Chalkie. So, like, you get that element of teaching where, you get a bit of independence. I can't imagine what it's like in China. So like here it's like, okay, so you're going to teach media.
Yeah.
So I taught media and drama, same as you, right?
Yeah. Well, English.
Like,
I'm English.
There's that element of like, what are you going to do? The start of the year, you're like, holy shit. Like,
yeah.
I'm going to teach these guys about trees. Do I start with the root system or with leaves or what? Like, suddenly it seems much bigger. Yeah. Especially when you start with a basic thing like, I don't know, so me, you'd be like, all right, rule of thirds. And they're like, what? And you're like, oh, okay, so first I need to teach them about framing and mise-en-scène.
Yeah.
Okay, that means I need to go back and talk about shot size, camera movement. You just this constant rewind.
Yeah.
But then on top of that, I mean, here the worst thing, like I've taken a year. Currently, I'm in a year where I'm doing art, like following artistic dreams.
Yeah.
Right, which has been fun because it's like I'm going to apply for grants. Boom, plague hits. No grants.
So, did you do the 4-year program where you sacrifice part of your salary and you get a year off?
No, I wish I did.
Yeah, it's a great idea. When I was teaching, that was my plan, but I never did it.
It's like things like that, though. It makes you wish that there's a reason why people do that, and it's like that's a real concern with the Department of Education here in WA, as well as the fact that they're like, oh, we're losing a lot of teachers in the first 5 years, right?
Yep.
And I'm sitting there and I'm like, yeah, well, I'm in my 6th year. I'm the head of a department at a high school, and like I don't get leave, long service leave until year 10.
Yeah.
It's like, well, even if I step outside of myself, I'm like, well, maybe a way of retaining people is to reduce the long service leave. But whatever. I think ultimately the thing is, it's one of those things you get into for a reason, right? You're like, I don't know about you, but every conversation I ever had with every teacher where it was like, well, what are we trying to do here? To me, the answer is always self-actualization. You're trying to teach people to think for themselves. You're not trying to teach them a rote bunch of things.
Yeah.
And it seemed easier in the arts because it's always like, I'm going to teach you principles. You can break those if you want.
Yeah.
But I'm going to teach them to you anyway.
Yeah.
Because it's how you know there's rules before you.
Yeah, you've got to know them before you break them, because you got to know. Yeah, teaching's an interesting thing. So obviously it's a different game for me entirely in China, because when I say mise en scene, everyone looks at me silly and they're, what language are you speaking? And the saying here in China, in Chinese, it's ting budong. Ting budong is I don't understand, right? They're like, I don't know what you're saying. So, and that's just ting budong. So they don't really get it. But they would understand it. They're smart kids and they would definitely understand it. And they probably do understand it in Chinese. They just don't understand it in English. And also the education system here is more of a business. It's more about, we need to get more students, and we need to, because it's expensive.
I would debate that point, but I think it would be a futile debate, because I think in both countries it works as a business.
Yeah.
I'm curious as to like whether China, in your opinion, is like, when I work in a private school, it's like the parents are like, we pay a lot of money for you to go here, so don't fuck around, do the work that you're asked to.
Yeah.
Whereas a public school is like, you get some kids who are like, I really want to learn. And then you get some kids who are like, I take pride in the fact that I don't do any work.
Yeah. Yep.
How slang changes? I was distressed to learn that a slang for, we used to use shit like try hard.
Yeah.
Or like, nerds really old, obviously. I'm trying to think of what else there was, but like kids now say sweat, where it's like, oh, if you're trying, that means you're going to sweat, and sweating for anything is
bad.
Like, yeah, and I was just like, but they mean it in terms of like, as someone who's mistrustful of authority, right?
Yeah, okay.
I don't have a problem with that. But this
yeah.
idea of like, I'm going to take pride, like Trump, in like being an ignoramus.
Yeah. Oh.
It's like, what the fuck? Like this idea of like, let's celebrate stupidity or like ignorance, and you're like, cool. Let's just go back. Let's persecute Galileo and go back to like, we're floating on a turtle's back. Yeah, that's what's really going on. It seems
frightening. It's a frightening situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. But also, I mean, it's hard because these kids are growing up in a world where that guy's the president of the free world, that's how he views himself,
Like that.
It's like
are you getting students who are like, do what the teacher says because we're in an authoritarian regime?
Okay, so going back to what you were saying before, right, about, at the private school, the parents pay the money and then they say to the kids, "Oi, you better do well because I'm paying a shitload of money." So in China, it's kind of the opposite. It's we're paying a shitload of money, so my kid doesn't have to do anything. We're buying his, his degree, so it's up to him what he does because we've already paid the money. So it's like the user or the client has the power, the customer has the power.
Yeah.
And so expensive places like my school where I work, and pretty much any school that has like a foreign teaching thing is going to be expensive in China. but also where I live, it's incredibly rich, very, very rich. Like, I walk out, all I see are Audis and Mercedes, and, I don't hardly ever see a clunker, from time to time, but they're normally electric three-wheelers. What's that?
No Harleys?
No, I've seen Harleys, yeah, because they're status symbol. Yeah, seen those. Ferraris, Lamborghinis, yep, see them all. There's lots of high-priced stuff here. But, the education system is strange. So that, when you think about it, right, so you've got probably the amount of students in China, I'm guessing, just at a rough estimate, would be about 400 million. So, and then you start thinking about university positions. So then, like, maybe one of the big universities might have 100,000 students, like the well-known ones, the really, really good ones, right? So you've got, so let's say out of the 400 million, break it down by class or whatever. And so let's say it's 50 million going for, that are graduating, 50 million are graduating, and there's 100,000 spots. So what percentile do you have to be in to get one of those positions? Right. So kids.
Man, that's exactly the same problem. I remember the stat when I was at uni in 2010 was there's 26,000 media graduates, media specialist graduates every year. And you're like, in Australia, there's probably like less than 1,000 jobs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So,
are you making that point of like, they're churning out graduates because it's good for business, but you're like, there's no work for these people.
Yeah. So, well, what I'm going with is just more on the education side is, so students are either highly motivated and are going to, if you're in the bottom in China, man, you are going to be a street sweeper or you are going to work in a factory. Like, the odds are that that's going to happen because to the amount of how good you have to be. You can be smart, man, and not cut the grade, You can be really smart. Like, you've got to be getting 100% or 99% to be in everything to get into those universities. And even then, I wonder how they rate them after that, like probably what school you came from as well, will be part of that.
I'm guessing it's not a complete meritocracy where the best people always get the best job.
Well, and that's the other side of it, right? So China has got not much to do with meritocracy. It's, they have a thing called guanxi, and that is like relationships. So, your father will be working to try and make good relationships with schools, and he knows a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy. That's kind of how it works.
They've got a word for nepotism.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But that's kind of the system here. So what happens is if you're a wealthy kid and your parents own a business, which like most of my kids' parents own businesses and like are very wealthy, then they need to know as much as they need to know to do the business, right? But the parents want.
I think it's exactly the same system as here. Like,
what?
Kids from MLC and PLC and Scotch College and all that, like they're not, necessarily the best at their job, but like blue-blooded parents will press a lot of flesh.
Yeah, absolutely. Not what you know, who you know. But also in China, so these rich kids, the parents don't want their kid to just, they can pay for them to graduate, right? And I mean, that's pretty much a given here in China, right? They've got the money. So, it's kind of like they're wealthy. And so they go to the school and they say, how much? How much is it going to cost me for my kid to graduate? I've got a kid that's been in my class for 2 years and he sleeps. That's all he does. He's going to graduate, and he will graduate with a certificate validated by an American company that will give him the opportunity to go to pretty much most American universities if he wants to. And he can't speak. He's Ting Budong. His name is King, and I call him King Budong because he just doesn't understand a word. of anything. And he doesn't even come to school now. He's still like stopped coming. He's in year 12 and he doesn't even come.
Hey man,
but what I'm saying is,
fair play to him. I remember you years ago you saying a similar pithy statement about the problems with the education system in the northern parts of our country.
Yeah.
Where it was like kids were getting hassled to go to school, and then the other option was, or you can go fishing in the outdoors and like pull fish out of the river and feed your family and stuff. And they were getting rained for it, and they were like, "What's the problem here?" And you were like,
"There's no problem.
I get it.
Yeah, I totally get it.
If it ain't broke."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the thing that I used to say to those guys was, they had, things were provided for them, houses was provided, and income was provided, and they said, so I said to them, "What are you going to do when you finish school?" And they're like, "I'm going to go down the river and go fishing and drink beer with my mates, and get pissed up and probably smoke some weed." And
that sounds like a white guy.
Yeah, and I said, well, there's a lot of people a lot of white people who spend their time working very hard so that they get the time to go and sit down the river, go fishing and drink piss and maybe smoke a joint and do that. You've just kind of just bypassed all the shit in between, all the hard work part of it, and you're just doing it. I mean, why wouldn't you? Why I would do that if that was available to me. Of course, I'd be doing it too. But I think you need to have some meaning. I think you need to have some meaning in your life. But if you've got that as well, have at it. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you do it?
I think that speaks to the point of like the deeper meaning of education is not results. It's not a meritocracy. It's like self-actualization, so that you can, I don't know, it's hard not to be cliche, it's like not to be the best you that you can be, but like that idea of I don't know, I'm assuming you're an existentialist, right? Where on some level, is there a God? Yes, no, I don't think there is. I could be wrong. And like, I'd be happy to be proven wrong. I'd be like, dude, this is great. Thanks, man. I was nice to people. Can I go fish at the river with my mates now?
Yeah.
While Jim plays music in the background. But if not, it's like, okay, so what's the reason to be alive? I don't know. Is it all going to be wiped out in the expanse of time? Maybe it's all futile. You're trying to make meaning.
Yeah.
It becomes a question of like, how do you do that? If there is no meaning in the world, you have to make your own meaning. It becomes a value judgment. I think it was Kant who said Kant, whatever.
Yeah.
Emmanuel. My boy Emmanuel was like, the idea of, it feels like a more salient point than, I think therefore I am, where he was like, if we're talking about what has value, the fact that I have consciousness and can question whether or not I have value, doesn't that make that the most valuable thing? The ability to discern what in and of itself is of value.
Yeah, I have a little bit of a different way of looking at education. For me, education, or what I hope with students, is that I'm able to provide them a space and the tools to discover what they're good at and what they enjoy, and to follow their heart, I think, and live a satisfied life.
That sounds really simple, man, but it's
really difficult. Yeah, absolutely.
It feels like the system's geared against you.
Oh, it's totally against you because it's about getting money. It's not about satisfaction.
And they want functional economic citizens.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not about, hey, you're an artist and then, and you're going to be great at it. And that's a legitimate thing to be. But you have the pressure of the parents and the family, and mum's a doctor, dad's a doctor, and they don't have much time, and they don't really have a lot of time to spend with me because they're very busy with their own professions, and they want me to be professional. And, we own really cool stuff, and they want me to be able to be self-sufficient and own really cool stuff too later, and enjoy owning really cool stuff, but not enjoy who I am, you know, like the self-satisfaction and the self-enjoyment of I sacrificed a lot and I did these things and I became this person that I wanted to be. I've become the person I wanted to be and I'm living the life I want to live. You know, that to me is what, you know, it's a very subversive idea really with education, because education, like you say, is not geared for that at all. It's geared about ticking boxes and jumping in. I remember the first class I taught, like the first ever class I taught of year 8, I think it was year 8 or year 9. And I said, I sat down and I said, right, got any questions?
What subject? What subject?
English.
Sorry.
Yeah, I was teaching. Yeah. So I was teaching English, and it was a matter of introduction. And I said, right, so my name's Keith, and you know, I've just finished. You know, I'm a new teacher here. So any questions? They asked a few questions, and I said to them, so I've got a question for you guys, right? So I was kicked out of every school I went to, and I never finished year 10. So how am I your teacher? And they all looked at me like, that's impossible. You're like, you've cheated. You've cheated. You must have cheated. There's absolutely no way that could have happened. And the whole point of it, to tell them that story, was that there's more than one way to get where you're going. You know, you don't have to finish. It doesn't rely on year 12. University's not, you know, about how you did in year 12. You can still do things, you know, and then things become possible. And regardless of what happens in school's not everything, right? And you can succeed, you know, and that's kind of what my message was to them, that this isn't everything. And look at me, I got kicked out of schools, right? I got kicked out of schools, and I didn't finish year 10. And because they just said, you cheated, you lied, like you're not really you're not really a teacher, are you? Like, this is a lie. Like, how is that possible that you've never finished year 12 and never studied year 12? How can that be possible? And so I wanted them to see, like, immediately that I shattered the box. You know, it was like, here's the box. Everyone's telling you, you got to do this, you got to do that. And yet my teacher, he never finished year 10. How the hell is... You know, and probably if they went home and told their parents that story, their parents would probably go, what the hell's that guy doing in the school? And like, fuck.
You know what, though? I think that's more common than you think, and it should be, like, same as you didn't finish year 12, but there's that idea of, like, man, all my really high-achieving students, the ones who had a lot of pressure from home,
yeah,
the main issue with them was, like, trying to get them to remember that it's like, look, if you bomb ATAR really badly, you're not going to die poor and lonely. Like, you'll be.
It doesn't have to be that way. Yeah, definitely.
That's it. It's like you might have to, you know, it's like the Game of Life board game. It's like you might have to roll a couple of extra throws. Like,
oh yeah,
you're not going to get to the front of the class on your own merits. But then again, you know, you could bomb year 12 real bad, and if you know the right people, it won't make a difference.
Yeah, well,
I mean, the thing is, like you're saying, it's like, why are you trying to learn? What do you want to do, you know?
Well,
when you leave this joint and your parents have no sway over your life, what are you going to do? Are you going to do what they've trained you to do, like Pavlov's dog?
Yeah.
Like, is that...
And
because if that's your goal,
yeah,
you know, you might as well... I mean, I wouldn't say it to a student, but it's like, you kind of want to say, you might as well not exist, because, like, if you're just going to do what you're told, then...
you're a slave.
You're part of it. Like, what's the point? Like, the worst thing is to just be... Okay, sorry. Flipping it, right? Aristocratic. I used to hate that word.
Yeah.
Right? And as you look it up now, I'm like, oh, it's rule of the best. Okay, but instead of the best being judged by, like, who's the, you know, noble family with the most land, it actually makes sense where you'd be like, who should make climate change decisions? Let's make climate scientists make those decisions. They're the best qualified. Who should make decisions about land management? Probably people who have been trained in land management. Like,
I think competency based.
kind of makes sense, where you're like, get the best qualified brains in a room, like a think tank, and go, right, how can we do this?
Oh, definitely. Yeah,
Like-
and yeah, it just surprises me that governance is the antithesis of that. Often it's, bureaucrats that often don't know shit about shit, apart from getting forms signed and which ones to do. They're masters at that shit. They're absolute masters. Oh, you need a A67, and don't forget the B55. And well, if you're going to have an A57 and a B55, well, you're going to definitely need like a C32. And and if you have all those three, well, then you're going to need.
That's how they grind it down.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, it's, I remember having this conversation where people were talking about, like, well, what's the best ideology? And I was like, you know what? It's neither. It's none of that shit. In Australia, there's a party called the Flux Party, right? And I was like, how much sense does this make, right? In a world where people jump on social media and go, here's my opinion about this shit I just took this afternoon.
Yeah.
Like, they're super eager to express themselves on every aspect of their life.
Yeah.
Right. So I remember hearing about these guys, and I don't mean this to be a plug, but I was just like, that is Grecian representative democracy. Like, the Greeks were like, let's vote on everything, every citizen, that's how it is.
Yeah.
And people were like, yeah, but a really small, polis group of polisi, whatever the plural is.
Yeah.
That's different. And it's like, nah. Flux has got that down, where it's just like, every act that comes before Parliament, you vote on it through email.
Yeah.
And if you're like, you know what, I don't know that much about it, you just give that vote to someone else. And I'm like, that's Facebook. Where people are like, this is my opinion, I'm not really qualified, blah, 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 blah. It's like, cool, if you've got an opinion, vote. If you don't, give it to someone whose vote you respect.
Yeah.
So in some ways, I'm like, man, if millennials can figure out a way to make, I worry that it's like, until their rights as individuals get shut down, they're not going to give a fuck about enough things. But if it does, or if they figure out a way to do it, it's like, man, if you have a system that works like that, where it's just like it's not up to the Blue Bloods or the Blue Rinse Brigade to vote things, and you can just go, you know what, I actually don't understand, in the privacy of your own home, without publicly looking like someone who's ill-educated or feeling ill-qualified to deal with a particular issue. You can rely on people and friends that you respect to guide you in a way that is like, holy shit, it's on a mass scale. The reason why Plato and the Greeks sat out on their agoras and were like, hey, look, if you want to listen to me, come and sit here on this porch. If you don't, I don't give a shit. You go stand over there.
Yeah, the unfortunate side of that is that it doesn't allow or accommodate or take into consideration the malevolent people who, which there are plenty in the world, who will be out to get alongside you and notice that maybe you're a little bit weaker than them in some areas and take your vote for their own means, That's
an easy argument to make, where I'd just be like, okay, do you think there's a greater evil in that, or do you think there's a greater evil in, like, hedge funds and the Koch brothers and, like, Rupert Murdoch and shape-shifting reptilian lizards who are just like, I don't give a seismic fuck
I'm not
about like what happened 20 years. Like, I just want Tories and, like, pseudo Thatchers to run the world.
I get,
we're looking at. Have you seen that new Attenborough doco? Probably not, because you live in China.
Yeah, pretty much. The latest doco I got was one on. It's called. I can't remember. I've just been watching it actually this afternoon. About COVID, like a documentary on COVID.
So his latest one in the rest of the world is like A Life in Nature, I think it's called, and it's just like, he just goes, here's where the world was when I started, and here's where it is now, right?
Yeah.
And the big difference is, like, everyone respects Attenborough because he's never really pushed an agenda. He's just gone, here's a bunch of facts.
Yeah. Telling you about animals,
you know?
and everybody loves animals.
Yeah. You know, and I'm sure there's things he regrets, like, oh, let's go meet this tribe that no one's met in Papua New Guinea. I'm sure he's like, fuck, I probably
Yeah,
shouldn't
that
have
was
done
close.
that. Like,
That was
Yeah.
real close. I remember seeing that, and and they were all like, you know, I think they were deciding whether they're going to kill him or not. It really looked like it. It really looked like it in that video.
Oh man, but not even in that level, but like the idea of like anthropological corruption.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
Has that been corrupted by his eagerness to be like, oh, I want to go look at this tribe that no one has like spoken to? It's like now they're not the same anymore. Like,
yeah.
Anyway, like whatever the point is, like, you know, his latest doco is about how the world's changed since he has done what he has done, and it's like there's a bit of a king hell bummer, and like, you know, it reminded me of Thomas Cole. I don't know if you're familiar with Thomas Cole, the painter. He did this great series called The Progress of Civilization, I think it was called, a series of 5 paintings. And, you know, when you look at it, it's like natural world with this rocky promontory, and then like man starts to settle it and starts to build small structures and like hunt animals. Next painting is like farming started, it's small scale. Next painting is like Roman grandeur, triumphal procession. Next painting is like barbarians invade Rome, everything's falling apart.
Yeah.
You know, Hieronymus Bosch scale, just everything's fucked. You know, and then the final painting is like nature's reclaiming.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, and it felt like that's kind of what Attenborough was. He wasn't trying to be like, look at what you've done, we fucked this all up. But he was just like, you know, we used to find this many blue whales, and now it's really difficult to find one.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Right. But he's a respected figure. But then on top of that, you're looking at it and you're like, you know, you frame that in an objective way. And I think one of the, it's not pure because it's still my personal point of view, but like I've always been one of those space nerds, right? Where it's like I watch a documentary about people getting to the moon and I cry every time because I'm just like, yeah, people are awesome, right? Because like to do that, you have to work together, and you have to work together in a way that is like so beyond my ken. Like I can't. You know, I don't understand rocket fuel. I don't understand rendezvous trajectories, all that. And you're like, man, they're all doing it, you know, on less processing power than the smartphone I use to type mean comments on YouTube, you know. But when, you know, you look at where we are now and it's like, man, people feel so disillusioned. And this goes back to the community conversation before where you're like, it's almost like teaching kids, you need to give them the tools to tune that out. Like growing up, I remember being like, I don't care what my friends liked or not.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone tells me I'm lucky because I was just like, I want to do this.
Yeah.
And if they were like, that's nerdy, I'd be like, fuck you, I don't give a shit. I want to play the drums, whatever. Like,
yeah.
You know? And now it's like, oh, social media, blah, 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 all these repercussions. And I'm like, I feel judgmental because I'm like, well, why do they care what people think? But
they do.
They do. But you also get this noise thing where the thing is attenuating kids to be like, you know, you need to, again, self-actualization. You need to get to that point where you're like, follow your bliss, find what, you know, makes you excited. And, you know,
inspired.
If anyone tries to detract from that, like cut them out of your life, because that's
it's a valid point. I think it's a thing that's often difficult for kids, especially in the world with worrying about opinion and things like that. And also,
is that tapping into what we're teaching them in schools, where it's a case of, you know, you're teaching them, it's like, you need to learn this by rote rather than you need to question why your teacher is even here in the first place because you didn't graduate year 10. and he's a degenerate who got kicked out of every school that he ever went to.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, that's the truth, though. But it's, I think what's a worry is that with social media, the consequences of being the black sheep, you know, and having your own voice and trying to have your own voice and standing out against the crowd is that there's a real high propensity of people like keyboard warriors, you know, in their anonymity to just try and destroy you, you know, and really...
But then, to me, it becomes a question of, this is why I don't like social media, right? It, like, that community that I was really craving, I was just, like, sitting there watching people have conversations online, and I was just like, I can't actually engage in this because, like, if you voice an opinion that's in any way kind of unpopular...
Controversial, yeah.
You just get ripped to shreds, and it's just like, it feels like... The two things I've taken from it are, like, the left has lost its sense of humor. And the second thing is, like, talking about controversial ideas is the same thing as endorsing them in a lot of communities where you're like, I'm just trying to play with the idea. And I'll give you an example, you know, where I don't agree with it and I feel like I should qualify it with a whole bunch of shit. But all I'm going to say is, like, I was talking to a friend of mine who is Indigenous, and he was talking about, you know, I said to him, how, you know, what would you do if you ran the world? And, you know, how would you address this issue of, say, sexual abuse in Indigenous communities, right?
Yep.
And the first thing he said was, like, I would talk about, you know, splitting families up and, you know, giving custody like you would do in a case of domestic violence or VRO, breach of VRO, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And, you know, someone on the periphery of the conversation just started ripping him to shreds. And he was like, look, I'm not saying this is the best thing. I'm just saying, like, I don't know, we could try this, we could try that. And it was just a conversation. And, like, it just got shut down so fast.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even endorsed. It was just like, you know.
Yeah, it's you know, to postulate an idea is a dangerous thing.
Yeah,
it's a dangerous thing.
That idea of, like, man, people are like, oh, such and such is a Rhodes Scholar, and you're like, man, Cecil Rhodes was a piece of shit. The guy's history is sketchy as fuck. If you look at that, there's some questions there. Let's not just say, oh, this is an academic who's a Rhodes Scholar. Like, this is the idea of course, you can question everything. But if you're just talking about a concept, we're not talking about, you know, Cyclone B, let's put people in a room and fucking gas them. We're just saying, like, let's discuss potential options, not let's do this.
Yeah, I think,
you know, that's where it just feels, like, frustrating because you're like, man, we're just trying to talk about ideas.
Yeah.
And I'm so used to those things just being shut down. Where online, unless you're talking on video like we are right now, it feels pointless. And me and a lot of people I know just don't even engage anymore. And there's a lot of people I know who are infinitely more intelligent than I am, and they're just like, I just don't do it anymore because it's too much hassle. And justifying yourself online gets in the way of actually getting work done.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, it's like, not to say it's an echo chamber, fuck it, it's totally pointless. It's just really frustrating when you're like, man, just because I raise a point, it doesn't mean I believe in it. It's just like, you know, we're all trying to find the best idea.
Let's talk about it.
Find the best solution to the problem.
Yeah, it's like discussion now is just fight. You know, it's not discussion anymore. It's a fight, and someone's going to.
And I know you spoke about it. You spoke about this with Michelle, and I know it's like there's a lot of people who are going to be like, that's reductive. And it's like, sure, I have conversations that are constructive occasionally, but they're the exception to me that proves the rule.
Yeah.
Like, but either way, the point is, in my experience, there was that element of, like, you know, that naive thing where people were like, I look at the internet and I'm like, holy shit, Gutenberg, every book I could ever want.
Yeah.
Is there. This is great. You know, I was saying just the other day to my partner that I was like, you know what's really frustrating is, like, even something as simple as Wikipedia, it's like I get this really broad depth, really broad level of learning, but no depth. It's like to get the depth, I still have to buy a book or an ebook or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's still, you know, to quote Paul Simon, an age of miracle and wonder. It's like I can get that at the drop of a hat. It's no problem.
Yeah, you can get a bit, and that's the interesting thing. Like, I don't know if you've seen the documentary, "The Internet's Own Boy," where the guy tried to make JSTOR, like all the academic documents, public and available to everyone for free. So I mean, subversively, like, so he tried to undermine their, you know, capitalistic money making thing of you know, knowledge, and he tried to make it free for everyone, and they ended up putting him in jail, and he ended up killing himself. And I think he was maybe 23. He was a very, 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 very smart guy, and it's an absolute tragedy of a story. But to go with your point is that you get access, like the internet allows you access to a little, and it also gives you access to a lot of some things, but other things, and especially current things and current knowledge and current ideology or current you know, discussions are still the property of the elite, if you like.
You know, but it's still informative. Like, for example, you know, when you're typing in, to mention a proprietary communication network, like something like Messenger, right? If I type in poo, a little poo icon comes up, right? Yeah. Things like that, peace, whatever, pizza, tons of things come up. It's still really informative when things don't come up. Like if I type in a GIF and I'm looking for Nazi, nothing comes up.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm like, you know, people who are neo-Nazis in my mind are just like people who haven't read enough, you know, like always reminded of Bill Hicks, you know. Do you ever notice how people who believe in creationism look really unevolved? It's the same with Nazis, but it's still funny that it's like I sit there and I'm like, oh, this is like, it's interesting how curated this is.
Well, yeah.
Where even making private jokes among friends, you know, there's nothing.
Is censored.
You type in people out, you get nothing. You know?
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, you know, and this is, you know, the big thing I think with America and its divide at the moment is, so I'm a fan of Jordan Peterson, and they tried to shut him down because he refused to be told how he could speak, you know, and but that's what's happening. It's happening a lot in America. I don't know to what extent it's happening in Australia. You'd have more of an idea because you're in a classroom, and I'm guessing you get told from time to time what things you're allowed to talk about and what things are off limits.
Yeah, it's very subtly done. But Peterson's part of the same thing as well. Like, in principle, I agree with what he's saying, where it's just like,
me too.
The way he goes about it is really pig-headed, and I think the evidence he cites to justify his means is really Eurocentric and pretty flawed. But again, it just feeds into the point where it's like debating him about that stuff misses the whole fucking point, which is like capitalist institutions are destroying the planet. That's the fucking problem. Who cares about, like, pronouns? I know that's a shortcut to be like, people are talking about them, they, he, she, transgender stuff. Like, as a person who, that's not an issue for me. So, like, I feel I'm obviously, not even I feel, I'm obviously ill-qualified to talk about it, right? But I look at people talking about it, and objectively, I'm like, while I agree with that, you're missing the point. Like, people pulling minerals and resources out of Africa don't give a fuck about international law. let alone
Oh yeah.
what progressive politics is talking about. And progressive politics, since the fall of the Soviet Union, has become this, instead of actually having, like, what are we going to replace capitalism with? They're too busy fighting about, like, feelings and emotions. And it's like, I'm not saying you can make everyone feel like shit, whatever, like, that's fascistic. I'm just saying it's less important than us finally deciding how we want to address each other, only to find that we're trying to live on a dead planet.
Yeah, I think, because in the lead up to doing the show, we were talking about capitalism, and I think I sent you the one that, this is my catchphrase though for capitalism, is it's like, if humans are so smart, how come capitalism's the best we could come up with? Because I think we are smart, and I think it's a cop-out, it's like, it's so entrenched, and because it has power, and until we undo the idea of money being everything, it's going to succeed.
The weird thing is, optimistically, we already try to. It's like, I always used to say to kids at school, I'd be like, man, everyone's parents teach them, share what you have.
Well, not everyone.
It's not your toy, share it with your sister. And you're like, why can't we just do that?
Yeah.
On a big scale, like, because okay, so I'm Irish, right? And it'd be easy to watch a bunch of Ken Loach films, who I love, and sit there and go, English people are fucked. But every English person I meet is quite nice, right?
Yeah.
That's not to say the history of English colonialism is inexcusable, right? I don't doubt that a bunch of rich people who live across the river from me, or who live in Dalkeith or the Golden Triangle in Cottesloe and whatever, I'm sure they're all nice people. I'm sure they probably agree with me in a lot of aspects where they value the arts and things that I value. It's just this element of, like, can we surrender some of the stuff we want now, so that, it doesn't really bother me, because I'm going to be dead before this shit's really a problem. I don't have kids, but I can understand that people with kids are like, man, they're going to inherit a fucking shitstorm. And I feel bad for them.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's an indictment on us if we don't do something about it. On the flip side, Thunberg speaks up 6 months later. It's like, well, there's this worldwide movement, and then you get Extinction Rebellion in a lot of different cities. There's a good thing in social media. How do we harvest that? Like I was saying, using a local political party as an example, to, instead of people jumping on social media going, oh, well, my life is so hard, this is bullshit, to, like, I'm going to vote on this one particular issue. I think that's progress. And maybe that's progress that boomers didn't see coming, so you can use it to subvert the way they're trying to run the world, like Uber did, where taxi drivers were like, holy shit, what do we do? How do we, and it was just like, well, people want this, and they've got this model that totally works. You're going to have to adjust,
Yeah, I think, I guess what I'm getting from this, and what we're talking about here, is we need to have an idea of the things that have higher meaning. So we need to get away from the meaning of the individual, like, I'm hurt, or I'm offended, or, and we keep going down that path of, like, validating the individual. But we haven't tried to address the larger issues which affect all of us, because we're all on the planet, that are the issues that are to do with, these things that have actual implications globally, right? So I kind of think that, if it affects everyone, then it has more meaning than the thing that affects the individual. And I'm not, of course, and it's crazy to have to even explain it, because that should just be self-evident, that something that affects everybody should be priority, right? And something that affects the individual can be dealt with.
A good example is, like, eating meat. I eat meat and I know it's super wasteful, right? Like, we could all cut that out. Point number one, Let's not let me be involved in any government decisions because I can't keep a through line in any one conversation without getting a whole bunch of Wikipedia tabs opened. Point number two, being able to open a whole bunch of Wikipedia tabs in a conversation is great.
Yeah.
Point number three, which is to what you're saying, is it doesn't matter. You're talking about an idea of something as simple as, say, responsibility or justice or equality. Everyone thinks it's self-evident. I've never spoken to anyone, even the most rabid, laissez-faire capitalists I can say, do you think that healthcare, housing, such and such should be available to everybody? They all say yes. They just disagree on why
and
it shouldn't be provided by a government.
Yeah.
Right?
And how, yeah.
And when you bring up the idea of like, hey, we're pretty smart and we've like semi-conquered the environment, can't we kind of do the same thing by like limiting our growth instead of going for this ridiculous capitalist idea of like infinite, short-term growth for every fucking availability, every metric we have to measure it is like, is it growing or is it not? It's like, man, it can't. It's not sustainable. Like every economist knows it's impossible. And even now I'm seeing, I can't remember for the life of me the names of them, but there's plenty of like neoliberal economists who are like, we need to figure out a way to do this in a way that is, they probably don't use the word sustainable, but, the Amazon rainforest is not infinite. And it's like, cool, if you want to chop it all down, how long is it going to take to regrow it? On that level where you can't just keep treating it the way we did, say, the whaling industry at the turn of the 20th century. It's like, it ain't going to happen. And I don't think people are dumb enough that it's going to take, any version of the apocalyptic movies we've seen for us to go, oh, shit.
Yeah,
I think about that.
I think the main critique of capitalism is its short-sightedness, is that, it's immediate gain. It's immediate gain. And, it's...
Yeah, that element of like... people don't want to work together. They want to have more than their neighbor. And it's like bullshit. You look at any war movie, going back to Salvatore Ambulando, you look at a war movie, you look at a flood, you look at people in difficult circumstances, everyone helps each other out. They don't start gnawing the breastplate off their nearest neighbor because they don't have enough chicken wings,
Yeah, I think there's probably some people who would disagree with that, because there are people who would definitely do that. And how we would deal with that.
Here's a question. Has your bike ever broken down?
Rarely. I have had a bike broken down, and bike people do stop, and sometimes car drivers stop too. But I found that more so.
You can make that case about anything.
Yeah. I found it more so in Asian countries. I found that immediately people are there at your assistance immediately. In the West, it's a little bit different.
Go to the Eastern idea of like it's less individualistic, but that's a massive generalization. It's like maybe we're just assholes here in the West, who knows? But I think it doesn't really matter where you live in the world. I think if you see a person in distress, most people stop. I can't. What's the name of the, in New York, the famous case where people are like, she was screaming and she got raped and like nobody came and helped?
Yeah, no, I can't remember. I don't know either. But there's also that situation of if it's one person, if one person is there and they're the only person, they're likely to jump in. But if there's a crowd of people, they'll all stand around and watch it happen. It's a very strange phenomenon with humans, but it's like if there's just you and you see something bad happen and you look around, well, it's and I'll do something. But if there's 20 people there, like it's kind of like everybody waits for someone else to do it. You know, it's a strange,
That's true, and I've seen
strange
that
human
firsthand.
phenomenon.
I was at the bus station in Perth years ago, and a guy, young Japanese tourist, got killed right in front of us.
Wow.
And I remember it was like, yeah, it was like slow motion. And I started thinking about, you know, he had a white shirt on, and it wasn't white for very long. Like, I remember this guy was walking around asking people, and this was obviously drugs, so he was asking people for cigarettes. And he asked me, and I was like, sorry, don't smoke, blah, 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 usual suspect. And then this guy, he just stabbed him in the neck for no reason. Like, or he must have had his reasons, like inherent racism, whatever the fuck it was. But he stabbed this guy. Everyone looked because, you know, there was a noise. I had headphones on and I still heard it. And I remember I like went to run towards the guy, and then I was like, in my head, like you're saying, it was a hesitance because I was like,
why is no one else doing
his neck?
Oh,
no, because like, what if I break his neck because I don't
know what I'm
sit
doing?
him right in recovery position, like this in this litigious society and rah, but whatever. Yeah. By the time I got there, it was probably already too late. But like, there were already people moving, and then like other guys chased this dude, and he got caught and like paid his dues to society according to the system we have, which let's not even debate. It's rehabilitated. But there was, you know, like I worked in a servo. I was working in a servo at the time, and it was in a really rough neighborhood. And
I remember.
I used to see every single night where people would come in distressed, and some random person would come in and like, I'll go home, or like I'll stay here until the police come while you deal with customers, or whatever it was.
Yeah.
You know, and like, I mean, how many movies do you see that are like, it's a World War II movie, and like, oh, it's the worst of the Nazis, and like people banding together to help each other. Yeah. It's like, I think that's innate. People in times, you know, denial when they don't have much, they will instinctively help each other. It's the same argument I've had with Christians when they're like, what morality would we have if it wasn't for the Ten Commandments? Yeah. And I always just think, I'm pretty sure Moses wasn't walking around in the desert for 40 years, raping people, killing people, until he was like, oh, hey, guys, I've got these rocks that said we shouldn't do this. It's like, even if you believe that, it's like, I think there's an inherent resistance in people to hurting other people because it's unpleasant, because they're the same as we are. And, you know, I guess the old cliche, everybody bleeds red.
Yeah, I think if you have a modicum of empathy, but I wonder, like with social media and, you know, the kind of people that are always wanting
Some people don't.
Yeah.
It facilitates that.
Yeah, it's a really interesting idea of, you know, so because social media, I think we're really just now starting to learn how to deal with it. I think, you know, it's like, it's been around for a while, but I think now we're starting to be more critical of social media and how it operates, and certain people who use it in certain ways, and like people who get quite opinionated about how people use social media. And I've seen recently a lot of, you know, people who've said, you know, negative comments on social media groups. And a lot of people will jump in now and be like, man, you know, people have their opinions and people want to do things. And, you know, he just wants to ride that bike. Like, so simple instantiation would be, you know, this guy's bought this bike and he thinks it's cool, and then someone gets on, oh, that's a piece of shit. Like, why'd you bother buying that? And then other people will be on like, hey man, not everyone can afford a Harley, or not everyone can afford that bike or whatever. And you know, he's riding, you know, good on him, you know, good for you. Get into it and do that, you know, and more supportive. And I've been, I don't know, maybe I'm just lucky that I'm in groups where people do that, but I've kind of noticed that there's been a bit of a shift away from the negative, that like people are a bit off trolls now. They're kind of like, yeah, okay, you've had your fun, but we're kind of not taking that shit anymore. Like sometimes, yeah, I don't know. Maybe there's a change.
Like, I think there is. There's someone's going to write a great book about, if you think about the idea of communication. So like, we're sending telegrams. Oh, now we're writing letters. Then it was telegrams. Then it was telephones. There's not many people. There must be a culture. I wonder, like how the Japanese got gunpowder, and then they were like, you know what? Fuck this shit. We're going back to sword. Like, I wonder if there is a group of people who are like, don't need telegraphs. Not interested. Let's go back to pen pal stuff.
Like almost like a Luddite movement of people.
Yeah.
I do think that.
But if there's not, like, is it because rather than being hurtful, people just want to talk to each other and they want to communicate, and it's like, behind the acidity, they're just, it's as cheesy as it sounds. It's like they just want to talk to people. They just want someone to listen. I mean, I don't know. Every serial killer movie I've ever watched seems to be about this whole, like, my mother mistreated me and then I killed people. And now this cop who's investigating it kind of understands that my mum was a real bitch.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's ridiculous.
So just going back to what we were talking about before. Last night I was on social media, and there was a lady on there who was obviously distressed, and it was on a suicide prevention page, and she was just saying, "Fuck it, I'm doing it. I'm going to kill myself. Right? I've had it. She's got a mental illness, and I watched. I didn't really want to even be involved, but it was one of those things where you kind of see someone in that kind of distress, and you want to try and talk to them, get involved in some way that you can, and talk some sense to them, and try and be cold light of day with them rather than a pat on the back or a comforting thing. And
I bet you, if you did something as like problematic as like breaching the laws of like which phones are talking, who's talking to it, I think there would be probably a beautiful pattern where like people, someone saying, fuck this, I'm going to kill myself. You can probably see a surge of people heading towards them, don't do it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and also because it was a suicide prevention page, it's that kind of thing. But also she reached out, and, I was glad to see this morning, that she posted a thank you. She decided not to do it, and, she was, I guess, a bit remorseful about what had happened, and, what I don't know what had been going on for her. But
I think you've defeated your own argument when you were talking before about some people are perhaps inherently malevolent. It's like you see that a lot in social media, right? And I agree with you. Like today, I was talking to a mutual friend of ours, and we were talking about writing music, and suddenly the other tabs I had open went from like generative music and Brian Eno related searches to this dude talking about physics and like how he set a ninja course up in his backyard for squirrels. And I remember being like, I would never have found this guy.
Yeah.
On my own 2 feet. But like scientifically, he's awesome. He's a genius, and he's teaching me things about engineering. And like you just said, like it feels as though the positive's starting to outweigh the negative.
Yeah, I think there's a movement.
It's probably different for millennials and kids who are younger than us, where it's like this idea of trying to teach them how to ignore that shit, even though it follows them home. It's just that idea of like, man, who cares what those people think? You can build squirrel ninja courses in your own time. Don't listen to those guys.
Yeah.
You know, listen to these dudes. Listen to the Squirrel Ninja.
Yeah, and also, you know, creativity tends to inspire people, and you know that, you know, the capacity to inspire is a wonderful gift, and it's a thing that, you know, should be shared. It's the thing that should be shared.
It's a cliche now where those videos come up on the scroll, and it's like, here's here's a bunch of babies being cute. Here's a bunch of school kids showing each other manners, helping each other across a slippery snow path, whatever it is.
Well, I kind of wonder if like, I can't say our generation because your generation and my generation are different, but the older people are guiding the young people into almost like a social media etiquette. You know, like, don't be an asshole. Don't be an asshole on social media. And I wonder if that's, you know, the kind of that backlash against the people who are saying a lot of negative stuff, that now people are, you know, teaching their kids to do it as well. And
here's a super cynical take.
Yeah.
Or is it that people who have positive spins on it get more hits, so they get more money for their YouTube videos?
Well, it's been shown, I think, pretty much that the negative is the one that, you know, impassions people to fight. You know, the fighting thing is more, it's a more powerful instinct, and it also feels more impassioned. You know, it feels more valuable to people to, I'm standing up for something, and I'm going to stop you, you know, and we're going to fight. And I think psychologically it fires more neurons and does a lot more psychological work.
Yeah, maybe.
Doing that.
Has someone beaten Charlie Bit My Finger on YouTube yet?
Charlie Bit My Finger? Sorry. Sorry, man.
Yeah, man. Boomer, you're showing your age. Like, you know, little kids biting each other's fingers. Like, it was the most viewed video, I think, in history.
Yeah, right. Okay. Well,
I don't know. Like, I think what gets traffic, and it gets a lot of hashtags, you know, so it trends.
Yeah.
You know, that's the term they're using, is like, oh, it's trending on Twitter.
Yeah.
Like, I wonder how much longevity it has, because those arguments seem to fizzle out as much as, like, oh, Ellen DeGeneres is a really mean person, like, fizzles out.
Yeah. Well, I have to say it, man.
I don't know. Maybe I'm cocooned here in my ivory tower of white privilege, like, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. But I don't know. Yeah. Do you go back? Like, sometimes, you know, like, Black Panther was a terrible movie. I thought, this is a piece of shit. Right? There was so much hype around it that I remember looking for bad reviews, trying to find a bad review, because I was just like, am I mental?
Am I the only one?
Am I just being so negative? You know,
cynical,
that, like,
so cynical, yeah.
yeah. I couldn't. It was really hard to find negative reviews, right? I'm not saying. Actually, I am saying that film was shit. Like, it was so bad, and it was just, like, so riddled with cliches that you know, culturally, all I can think is, like, Hollywood has been so remiss in addressing African ethnicity in any kind of way, that they just latched onto this really poor representation, in my point of view, that it was, you know, is it just like, we've got this or the power of one, you know, which I know I'm making a massive generalized statement, but just as a movie, the narrative was shit. The story was really cliched. Like, it's got nothing to do with fucking race on those points. And the score was also terrible, even though I love Ludwig Göransson. I think he's a bit of a genius. But that score sucked hard. But, you know, you look at it and you're like, okay, I wonder if on a macro scale people are doing what I was doing, where it was just like, I'm looking for a negative point of view to reinforce my own.
Right, yeah, your own thing. Well, I think that's what people do. You know? People do always kind of look for things that And you know, Facebook feeds you that, right? It has the algorithms to see what reinforces what you want, and it keeps doing that for you. You know, so I guess you know, Facebook kind of as a thing will teach you to look for reinforcement of your things because that's what you keep getting from them because they keep sending you the same the
you
things
get stuck
that
in that echo chamber. Man, where's my echo chamber of like Black Panther was shit.
That's hilarious. And what, you know, because Hollywood and that is often just about money, you know, and so the storylines, they just rehash them and they just, you know, they go with what works and they know that at page, you know, 80 in the script, it's going to be that, you know, she's not going
Action
to, you know, he's going to reject her.
We need an action beat every 10 pages.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. You should possibly check out the podcast I did with Ben Young because that one's really interesting. We talked a bit about with scripts and stuff. Yeah, it was really good. Anyway, that's that. Talking about Ben.
No,
Young.
I did. I actually checked that out, and it was funny how, you know, it music industry wise, I was like, I think it was exactly the same thing where it's like, you know, Hounds of Love came out, and then it's like, boom, 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 here's a bunch of scripts. You're hot, you need to get into a production. You know, that turnaround was so fast, like he was talking about. I can imagine the thrill of it being like, man, I'm getting shit done, and like I don't have to. It's not like getting a uni degree where like maybe in 5 years, like I'll get to watch it on the screen. It's like, man,
and the pressure's off. The pressure's off too. Like you're getting recognition for your creativity. And Hounds of Love was an awesome film. I mean, it was really well put together.
Oh man.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, I'm living in Willagee, like 2 streets away from where
where they filmed
stuff actually happened.
Yeah.
But I will say as well, like, you know, he handled that stuff gracefully, same as Zach, in terms of probably always going to come up against, I hope, is get a bit of success, and then it's like, how do you keep your integrity?
Yeah,
and I think,
of course. Yeah.
In 22, Zach did that, and I think with Extinction, Ben did that as well. Like, and that's a, you know, it's a long bow to draw, and it must be a tough gig.
Yeah,
it'd be
definitely
a nice problem to have, but at the same time, it's like, damn, that would suck having people be like, no, you should just do, you know, Spider-Man 8.
Yeah, change the story. Like, just it's not like, you know, we want this to happen. And those kind of pressures.
Can we give him some kind of robot sidekick like R2D2, but we'll just call him like B469?
Yeah. I think Ben's really hung on to his integrity really well, and you know, kudos, shout out to Ben. You know, good job. And also, he was saying that you know, it wasn't without its problems shooting Extinction. You know, that was I think from what I got from when I was talking to him, it felt like it was difficult for him to make that movie. And I think it wasn't the way he wanted to make it. I don't know if you've seen it, but the twist at the end kind of, you know, I kind of get that may have been difficult to not lead up to it the way he might have wanted to lead up to that twist.
I mean, you know, like, it's problematic talking about this because it's like, who knows? Like, you know, I watched that interview and I remember thinking, like, who knows what it is? It's like, I can imagine, you know, like I remember reading, like, integrity is the byword. I'm just like, man, that is the yardstick, right? But I remember years ago listening to one of my idols, like Trent Reznor, was talking about, you know, you release an album, it's really successful, and then it's like, cool, it's time for the follow-up. And you start to think, should I do the same thing? Because I don't have to clean toilets anymore. Yeah. And, you know, a bunch of people liked the last album that I did, so should I do something similar because I don't have to go back to cleaning toilets? You know, where you get brought up against this thing of like, I did something that was my vision and people responded to it. And now I'm in this position of like, how much of my vision do I let in? Because cleaning toilets is shit.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, how much of my vision am I now allowed to put in? You know, when people are talking about large amounts of money, they start getting real precious with it. And you know, when I was talking to Ben, he was talking about, you know, people sort of hanging around and you know, wanting to be involved, and purely because they're invested, you know, and financially invested in it and wanting it to succeed, but also thinking that their ideas, even though they weren't the guy that made Hounds of Love, you know, but it's like, but my money means more than your ability, you know. It's it's
man, and then you get even people like, I'll put myself in the category of people like you know, you look at things like this again, this goes back to like fighting over scraps from the same table, right?
Yeah.
Ben got West Coast visions, and so me and Steve were like, hey, we should like reach out to Ben and be like, hey, we could do the music for it. So like, even on that level, you get people who aren't monetarily involved, but like are like banging down your door now suddenly because you've got a grant or you've had some level of success.
Yeah.
You know, and it's the thing of like, when you look at it yourself, you'd be like, you know, I look at that aspect of our job and I'm like, ugh, like, you know, I feel dirty. It's just like, it sucks and I don't want to do that. But like at the same time, like,
Gotta live.
Yeah, I want to have kids and I want to provide for them, like, and I want to provide for them in a way that I feel good about and can be proud of. And on my deathbed can be like, you know, I did Symphony number 5 in D minor, like, and it's a badass piano symphony. Like, how fucking great am I?
Yeah.
Kids, you know, before the consumption destroys the lungs, but like. You know what I mean? Like you're still caught in a, you know, in WA, it's like the mining industry runs everything, right? And it's like, I'm a beneficiary of that in some ways. And it's like, I also wish I could just be like, you know what, I'm going to get a job working for them. But on some level, I'm too stubborn a bastard and too selfish, self-righteous. So you kind of are forced to make your life difficult, but it becomes this element of like, to go back to Hounds of Love, I look at that and I'm like, you know what, as a cohesive piece of work, it's really fucking good.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, everyone talks about the cinematography, and the cinematography is great, but also like, you know, the way that feeds into how he shoots it and like how they act and how he must have cut around the decisions they made as actors. You know, that's the kind of shit that like 10 years later, the same as when you watch Brat Pack films from the 70s, you know, you get a hard on watching Apocalypse Now because you're like, fuck, this is so good. Because it boils down to people having to make choices.
And making good ones.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and and that is a tightrope. And as a fan of, you know, probably my favorite novel is Heart of Darkness, right?
Yeah, right. Okay.
So as a teenager, I was like, this is great. This totally illustrates why I'm right about exploitation and capitalism being shit. And then being like, oh, someone adapted that into this movie, Heart of Darkness. I was like, what? And then watching Apocalypse Now, I was just like, oh my God. Like, I couldn't believe how fucking good it was, even though superficially you're like, it's got nothing to do with it, but the levels that it works on. It's the kind of thing that sustains you over years and years and years of working, where you're just like, that's what I'm aspiring to. Like that, you know, total work of art.
Making your mark, you know, leaving your mark.
Yeah. And even with that existential thing, knowing that like all human endeavors are doomed to fail, like over a long enough timeline, they will fade and disappear. but you know,
Yeah.
I try to justify it to myself by being like, well, maybe we'll colonize other planets and people will upload hard drives on the moon. So if someone destroys Earth, they'll still have apocalypse now on lunar surface.
or
maybe I'm saying to myself.
Or maybe your creative endeavor that you leave for posterity that other people will enjoy. You know, there's a lot of things in history that get uncovered and long time after the guy has died, you know, and then they're like, wow, we found this thing and it's awesome, and you know, this guy, what a thinker, or what a artist, or you know, and they just kind of uncover something, and it's, you know, and the life of the person that did it has been an absolute tragic life, you know. They never got validated for what they were doing, and you know, everyone was like, you're a piece of shit.
Mystery. Like, I mean, that's why I've got the, I don't know if you can see it, the
that's not
bad tattoo of that. There you go. Hieronymus Bosch, right? So like, that particular image, people still argue about what it means, and I'm like, I'm sure if he could hear it, he'd be like, man, you know, I was talking about, it was a joke about penises or whatever it was. I'm sure we're totally misinterpreting it, but like, it's, to me, it's cool that people are still, they care enough to debate what the point is. Yeah. It'd almost be fun in a way just to, you know, hide that on purpose. Like, you know how formats become extinct? It's like, man, I'd love to leave a bunch of music around on formats that, you know, people aren't going to be able to play, just to be like,
yeah, like
some poor,
like on an 8-track. Leave it on an 8-track.
Hundreds of years from now, they're going to be like, fuck, how, you know, we need to build a clay device to try and figure out how to play this shit.
Gold, great idea. Okay, man. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. We've just clocked over 2 hours. Well, we're not to 2 hours 20 yet, but yeah, good.
Well, you should have about 40 minutes of usable conversation there. You know, you got to narrow those Wikipedia down.
No, I don't. I'm not going to cut it. I'm not going to cut it. It's going to go up as is. That's my thing. I always put it up as is, and you know, that's there for people to see. And yeah, again, great talking to you. And
yeah, man, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's been a blast. It's been a blast. Absolutely a fun chat, and some really interesting ideas too that we got into there. All very good.
Actually, before you go,
what happened to your list of things that you?
No, it's not a list. It's not a list. There's a couple of questions I want to ask. Right?
Yeah, sure.
So you're still recording?
Yep.
When do you have a bunch of open questions ready to go, or do you have a thread that you're like, I want to follow this, or are you just like, I'm just going to get this person on and see what happens?
Yeah, I go with the latter. Yeah.
So completely irresponsible journalism.
Oh yeah, I don't see it as journalism. I see it as I'm just going to have a chat and we'll see where that goes, you know. And people have things they want to talk about, and you know, if you want to talk about them, we'll talk about them, you know. And I kind of try and guide it sometimes. If it falls flat or whatever, I'll often ask about COVID or what you think of Trump, or just to get you, because people have opinions about those things.
I see you do this thing where it looks like you're looking at questions where you do this. You're like, you know, you say you've got a screen over here and a screen over here. You're like, yeah, that's fascinating. I just always assumed you had like a list of questions.
What I'm doing there, I'll get it, and that's a good point. So what I'm doing is I'm actually looking at the computer and making sure I hit the right button to change between me and you. So like I look over and I'm just like, okay, making sure everything's okay, and I'm like, well, how's this look? Yeah, it's looking good, and yeah, so I'm really just checking. I'm just checking. That's all it is. No questions.
I hope more people start tuning in, because it's cool to have unadulterated conversations with people. Yeah, I think it's almost like that question of teaching media, I'm like, you need to ask open questions. You need to ask open questions.
Oh,
but like
man.
the thing, it's like you have to get past that curated presentation, like what Twitter and Instagram is, where it's like, oh, this is who I am, where it's like I probably should have presented myself as a more responsible person instead of like, drinking too much alcohol and stuttering over certain words and being like, yeah, fucking whatever, generalisations,
Yeah.
But it's like, that's what conversations with you in the past have always been like, where it's just like you mosey around a maelstrom of a point, and sometimes you end up in the middle, and sometimes you get flung off, into the Bermuda Triangle.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, a thing I found doing the podcast too has been that I don't ask great questions, and I kind of want to get better at asking better questions, but I kind of fight that because it's a funny thing, right? Like I want it to be natural, and I want me to be me, and I want you to be you, right? So I want it to be that conversation. Yeah, I don't want it to be the conversation where I've planned a bunch of stuff and I've got a certain way of getting you to be, like I feel like that's kind of stealing. I want it to be a legitimate, honest and authentic conversation where it's just two people talking, rather than something that gets constructed. And
see, that makes me wonder then if, like, sometimes when, because I remember sitting there being like, am I supposed to be promoting something? And then being like, yeah, I'm really bad at that anyway, so fuck it. Like, I'll just, I kind of walk around putting screwdrivers in those tires anyway. Like, but I wonder, because like a lot of the people you've spoken to, I've met before, and like they're really joyous and people full of joie de vivre, and I'm like, oh man, I wonder how much, are they worried about how they come across? Like, not saying I'm an example, but like, in this day and age, again, it goes back to that ideology where it's like, in some ways, I could say to myself, I am commodifying how I present my stuff. So, like, if I'm going for a grant in the future, I could be like, look at this great conversation I had with this Chinese sympathizer who likes really loud motorbikes and empathizes with organized crime. But, it's not who I am, and that's not who I am. And, but you also don't want to become like Jan Event or like a Four Corners journalist where you're like attacking someone.
Yeah.
It must be a real tightrope for you to walk, because I know you're, a bit of a degenerate and a bit of a filthmonger, and I'm sure sometimes you're like, I don't want to go down that road. To protect people's privacy, because we're all.
Look. So I'm well aware that these things are going to be posted. Yeah. So I know that. So if someone goes to a place that I think is not going to be good, like something. But I mean, so I've had interviews where people have headed down the racism road or that kind of thing, where I just like try and lead the topic somewhere else. And yeah, and usually I know the person, so it's like not too difficult to do. But also I know it's being recorded, and I also know that you're not going to want to look at it and go, oh my God, he got me talking about that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that to anyone, And the way I look at it is, like I think we talked about it before, was it's two people having a conversation, but everyone's interesting and everyone has something to say, and people do have something to say. And if you get them, and this is a great platform for that, because the whole point of it is to have something to say, and everyone does. And so you get to have your time to say the things that you want to say, and the things that you think about, and the things that mean something to you. And that's great, because I think people who watch it, later at some point, you know, if they ever do, you know, probably got 200 views or something at the moment. But what I'm saying is that if anybody watches it, they'll go, oh, I didn't think of that, or oh, he's got a good point there, or what a load of shit, or whatever. But they can engage with it, and they can also form their own ideas and think about what they want to think about, and just say, oh, it's completely crap or whatever. Up to them entirely. But it's there, and it's there for them to look at, and it's there for them to engage with in whatever capacity they do. And I kind of see that the same as an artwork, where you make a painting and it's there for someone and you don't know what they're going to do with it, but you just put it there and it's there for them to look at.
In some ways what they're going to do with it. It's just, it exists.
Yeah. So for me, this whole podcast thing is just, it's not the field of dreams entirely of if you build it, they will come, but it's very much that I'm going to keep doing it because I believe in doing it. And that's it, really. It's not that I have some ulterior motive or anything like that. But I got a lot of pleasure of watching Joe Rogan and other people's podcasts. And so I thought, well, I'm going to put one out there of people that I think are really interesting, and other people can choose
on that
whatever.
note, one thing that you said reminded me, like, the thing that got, when you were talking about podcasts way back at the start, and you were talking about, gear that people have, I think it was before we started recording.
Yeah.
The first thing that came, the Serial podcast was like this big revival thing. But the thing that got me hooked in was this podcast called 99% Invisible, right? And they talk about shit that you look at the subject matter and you're like, that's going to be a boring podcast. Like, it'll be like the history of speed bumps. Yeah. And it's fucking amazing every time. You just like, that's why I kind of jokingly, watching your stuff leading up, I was like, he says fascinating a lot. And then I was like, oh my God, that's exactly what I kept saying watching 99PI, where I'd be like, oh my God. It doesn't matter what you look at. If you look at it deep enough, it's really fascinating. And I think, what was it? There was one episode that it was the prime example of it. It was looking at something like, not even as this, it was this guy created this thing that was like a fart joke, and it was supposed to sting, right? Yeah. Liquid art. And then the whole podcast was about how now they use it to train army surgeons in the field, like how to cut people up. And it's like, what? It goes from like a 10-year-old kid's joke of like, it smells like my asshole, to that thing saves people's lives.
Yeah. I have
the conversation goes in that direction.
Yeah, I'm going to be on topic a little, like not in the sense of saving lives or anything, but I've always had this thing like, with Christianity and, people take Jesus very seriously. And, every human being I've ever met has a sense of humor somewhere. Some of them are pretty strange, but everyone kind of seems to have one. And farts are funny. Like, I think when you're a kid, you pop and you hear kids giggle, man. They fart and they giggle, and it's just the funniest thing ever. And I made a smell, and now you're smelling it, and you're going, ugh, and it's just the funniest thing ever. And so I always have this thing about, I don't know if it's Christianity but Jesus. And I'm just like, I wonder if Jesus ever went to Peter, hey, pull my finger, I have this thing. I don't know like where I've got that from. Like, maybe there is a Jesus, and maybe he's told me, like I used to say to Peter, pull my finger, because it's funny, and parts are funny, and it doesn't make any sense, and it's kind of part of being human. And
but it does. It does. It makes perfect sense. It's. I remember seeing a behind the scenes interview with Jim Morrison, and he was like, when people are being the most serious, I find it's usually hilarious. And when people are trying to be funny, it's usually the most serious thing.
Yeah.
Which I think is what I think Muhammad Ali said that as well. Like, I don't need to tell you any jokes. The truth is the biggest joke of all. Like,
Yeah.
we're both Bill Hicks fans. I know Michelle is as well. She brought him up. Like,
yeah.
I think there is that element. I think if Jesus did exist, right? Surely, same as Robin Hood, he would have been like, "Oh man, should we jump out and scare these guys?" No, man. Like, the sheriff of Nottingham is trying to fucking kill us. Like, no, but let's just do it. Like, let's just jump in the carriage and like drop a fart and then run off.
Yeah.
And not take their shit, and they're just gonna be like, "What the fuck?" I agree with you. I think Jesus totally would have done that.
Yeah,
because Peter would have been, "I'm his most devout servant," and he is a really serious philosopher. And Jesus would have been like, "Oh man, I took the runniest shit today. It was so good."
Yeah, and it was like, you wouldn't believe what came out of me. But yeah, it's one of those things, and I think I don't know if it's just perhaps a reaction to the seriousness of religion or whatever, or the indoctrination or whatever that goes with it. But I tend to see that religion seems to miss the idea of comedy, and it's a part of humanity, and it's part of who we are, as people. And so, yeah, I think that's probably where I came up with that, "Hey, Peter, pull my finger," like, "What? Get that?" Catch that. I just have that. I have that.
Be dead right. You have to be right, because, isn't every single like Netflix thing where it's like, look at this cult, everyone outside the cult goes, "What the fuck?
Yeah.
How did that happen?"
Yeah.
But at some point, they had to be like, "Oh man, what if?"
Yeah. Or the Bhagwan Rajneeshi and all the yoga and all that sort of thing, and him going, "What? Hey, Jill, get that?" That's the best thing I said all day. But
I just slipped the answer.
Yeah, but
it's like the old, as much as I might be a socialist, I still find it hilarious when people go, "What's the difference between capitalism and socialism?" In capitalism, man exploits man. In socialism, it's the other way around.
Nice.
You have to have a sense of humor, even though I might be like, "Oh, that's not true. We're trying to collectively share we're trying to get rid of slavery and provide some kind of ownership over the working man's labor." But if it's funny, it's funny. That's why Monty Python fucking ruled.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, we've now clicked over 2 hours 30, so we'll wrap it up.
Go, man.
We'll wrap it up.
Run out of proverbial tape.
I've run out of tape. Yeah. Oh, look, the machine's just about to finish. Anyway, great to have you on, man, and a great conversation and a lot of fun. And a good time. Yeah, and good to catch up with you as well.
It's almost like having a conversation in person.
Yeah, almost.
Almost. But, we'll put that on the list. And so until next time, viewers can blame me for the terrible theme music. You might try, now that you feel socially obligated to.
Yeah. Well, there's that too. So, yeah, listen out, everyone. Maybe the next show, a different intro provided by Dave Richardson. Once again, Dave Richardson. Yeah. It's been awesome. And good luck with the play too. I hope that goes really well. It sounded like a really interesting creative play that you got going on there. Yeah. And if you've got any links or anything that you want to send, things that we've talked about or anything, shoot them to me and I'll throw them up as well on the video too.
Will do.
Okay, adios, bro. Take it easy.
Take care.
Okay, that's us, man. So recording is finished. And you've got an Asahi. I was drinking those last night, man. I ended up losing $200 today. Oh, Keith.